question 32. This is from SAT reading number 11. This is the first question that we have after the passage here. And so this question is a big picture question, right? So that's not sort of a main idea. And it asks, this main purpose in the passage is to do something, okay? So talked about these before, these main purpose type of questions. And the way that we approach them is sort of twofold. So one, you have to have at least a decent general understanding of the passage, of what's going on. If you get this from the first read, you can get this just by going through and trying to ask yourself, like, what's the main point of each paragraph? It doesn't have to be super detailed, but you want a general impression of what's there, as well as you'll see in this example, sort of an idea of what's not there. First, the second thing that you need to do is you need to locate specific text within the passage, so specific sentences, either in the subtitle, right? That's that info right below the main title, in the introduction or in the conclusion. And as you're scanning for info in that, you're also going to look for words like however and but, which sort of signify this is something that's going to be important. Between those things, a general impression and more specific examples, you should be able to narrow it down and figure it out. This is kind of a more tough example, but we should be able to get through it. And let's walk through. So first thing is, this is like a passage outline, which is a little hard to see. Let me move it just a little bit so you can see it a little better. Okay, so this is the passage outline. We don't need to go into too much depth here. Obviously, we're not going to write this. We're not even going to take notes like this. But this just is for us to have a little quick impression. So paragraph by paragraph, it starts by saying that the question of slavery, like we're told, right? Women are told that the question of slavery is a political question. And but it's inappropriate for women to ask. But it is also a question of humanity and morality. I did not summarize that in an excellent way. But what this means in the first paragraph is that basically the question of slavery, women are told that it's a political one and they shouldn't be involved, right? So it's inappropriate for them to ask. But the author argues, it's also a question of humanity and morality, etc. So it's a question that should be open to them. Paragraph 2 says, should women be allowed to participate in this debate? And then she challenges it. She says, is it really only a political question? Next one, given that the Constitution would require the North to put down slave insurrection, this is a specific example she's using. Cost the lives of men, should this question concern women? Basically, her point here is that, let's say, for example, there was a slave insurrection in the South, the men of the North would be required to intervene, which would affect the women in the North, right? So she's making this case like, how can it just be a political question if it's going to impact their daily lives? The lives of their families, etc. It's like, isn't that a concern, right? Isn't her duty to herself, family, and country, isn't that enough to participate in the debate? And she concludes by saying, even if women do admit it is a political question, basically, so what? Shouldn't they participate in such an important debate? The country matters as much to them as anyone. So that's sort of the basic outline. The next thing we want to do is we want to look at these key points in the passage to try to identify any specific information that will help us answer our question. To be honest, what makes this question a little bit harder is that we really don't find too many specific pieces of text that will give us the main purpose of the passage. I still want to walk through the exercise a little bit because we'll glean something from it. And also, this is just sort of what we have to do when we're on the text. We're going to do it very quickly. This is what it's going to look like. So we'll start with the subtitle. Subtitle is basically just saying it's a speech delivered here at the Anti-Slavery Convention of American. Honestly, not too much there. We know it's an anti-slavery convention, but that's not going to tell us too much, so we can skip that. Then we have this intro. It's a pretty long introductory paragraph, so it's hard to read it a little bit, but we want to be able to sort of break it down into structure. So this starts by, we are told, okay, so this is the they say, I say structure. We are told that it is a political question. So from here, basically, we are told that this is only a political question. Then she just says it is not true, that it is merely a political question. Instead, it is a question of all these things. From here is just her basically explaining all the things that it is, right? It is likewise a question of this, right? It's a question of whether the laborer shall receive the reward of his labor, whether he shall walk, whether his bones will do this, right? This is, I think, who knows what the heck it's called? Anaphora or something? What is that? Yeah, it's like the repetition of war, right? It's anaphora, okay? All you rhetorical device people, I don't know. anaphora, right? Whenever you see that on a text, it's almost like you can sort of collapse all of that. You don't have to read every part of it. Once we get the pattern, we know the pattern's going to continue, right? She's just saying these are all the things that it is, more on top of being the political question, all the way down to here. These considerations are all involved in questions of liberty and slavery. This long paragraph really just compresses into a couple things. She says, other people say it's just a political question, don't get involved. And she says, it's not just a political question, it's all of these things. So that means we should get involved. Simple as that. Next, we go to the conclusion. Again, we have something very, very long, but we want to compress it a little bit. So it starts here by saying, but admitting it to be a political question. So let's say it is a political question. Have we no interest in the welfare of the country? Rhetorical question. May we not? And we see another rhetorical question. She continues, may we not? Another rhetorical question. Must we witness? Another rhetorical question. Shall we silently watch? So I don't even know what these questions they're asking, but what we can assume and predict and what is the case is that she's just asking a bunch of rhetorical questions, meaning these are questions, not necessarily questions without answers, but questions that she's using to get her point across, right? So the questions that she's asking is basically the answer is no to all of these, right? So she's just making the case that women, even women, should be interested in the welfare of the country. And it continues all the way up to here, and there's her final answer, no. So all of this from here, we can collapse into one thing, right? This is basically her asking a bunch of questions where the answer is no. Women should get involved. Women do need to get involved. And this explains the events of the last 2 years have cast a shadow, right? So this is about civil war, I think, right? Our country is dear to this, etc. And then basically down here, let our course then still be onward. So the structure is a bunch of rhetorical questions, basically asking, is it wrong for women to get involved, right, in something that's political question? Then your answer, no, it's not wrong. Here's the reason why. We're in these dark times, right? Our country's been affected, so we must continue onward. So again, like I said, there's not too much in these specific examples that are going to help us answer the question. But by now, we should have a general impression. I know I've been going for 7 minutes. There's no way that you're going to be able to spend 7 minutes on a question. All of this should be done very quickly. Later, I'll have videos about how to do that. But for now, this should just tell you like sort of the idea and the knowledge that you need to have in your head, sort of the general idea that you need to have before you get started answering the main purpose of the passage. Maybe you think that's a lot of work. Maybe you think it's better just to write the answer choices. I disagree because I think, honestly, if you get the strategy down, you can predict pretty easily what the answer is going to be. So we can already sort of say in advance the question. The main purpose of the passage is basically to say that the question of slavery is not just a political question, right? It's more than that. Women should be getting involved in the cause of abolition. Even if it is a political question, it's still their business, basically, right? So abolition is women's business. Here, accuse fellow abolitionists of overlooking the contributions that women have made to the movement. Now, if we have a general understanding of the text, we should understand that there's no point where she's addressing fellow abolitionists, right? This is a strong and specific claim, right? So for this to be true, we have to have really clear examples where she's saying so-and-so or you fellow abolitionists, you're not looking at the contributions women have made to the movement. Again, a specific claim. So there's three things. Like, one, there's no accusation. Two, she's not addressing fellow abolitionists. And three, there's no point where she's talking about specific contributions that women have made or even general contributions. She's just encouraging women to get involved. So this next choice is wrong. He says, argued that the cause of abolition and women's rights are continuations of the spirit of the American Revolution. This seems on its surface like a good answer choice. It sort of fits the right tenor, the right general idea of what's going on, right? That the causes of abolition and women's rights are continuations of the spirit. If we just read this as abolition and women's rights are good, positive things, we're going to get the answer choice wrong. Because it's saying more than that. It's saying specifically that these causes are continuations of the spirit of the American Revolution. Could be true, could be something that she even agrees with. But we would have to find specific textual evidence where she's saying she's deriving all of her argument is derived from the fact that these are continuations of the spirit of the American Revolution. So she's referring back to it. If we go back to the text, or just based on memory, there's no mention of this spirit of the American Revolution propelling or motivating the argument. So it's too specific, we get rid of it. C, look at C. Make the case that women's rights are meaningless while slavery exists. This right here is what we have. It has pejorative flair. I'm gonna get a better name for that. I know it's a big Latin technical word. Basically, it just means like bad vibes, right? If you're saying women's rights are meaningless, already in your head, you should be thinking it's probably not going to show up on the passage. There's nothing too controversial in these. They're pretty standard, right? You can just sort of predict a pretty neutral political stance. So there's no text in here that's going to say women's rights are meaningless, even if the sentiment's good, because basically it's saying women's rights are meaningless while slavery exists. Maybe that's a really positive sentiment to have, just based on this word here, women's rights. It's just too strong. It has too much negative meaning, negative baggage. It's probably not going to be right. And then if we just think about it a little bit further, we're going to see it's not right. There's no points where she's like, as long as slavery exists, women have no rights. She's not making that point, and we can eliminate it. D, encourage women to see their participation in the abolition cause as just and important. So this is definitely a right answer. It's got so many things going for it. One is just notice how general it is. Encourage women, it's very general. Just to see, right, just to have a change in perspective, see their participation in the abolitionist cause is just important. Basically encourage women to change their perception and say, yeah, they have an important role to play. It's very general. There's not too much that's wrong with it. It's neutral in terms of sentiment. It matches what we already said in the text, which is basically encouraging women to get involved. It's a good answer choice. We keep it and we move on.